Good evening. It's Monday evening, which means it's time for the political view. Over the last few days, there have been several important and perhaps surprising developments around the Public Investment Corporation. The PIC invests the pension fund money of government workers. As a result, it controls R2 trillion in assets and therefore plays an important role in directing investment in the economy. On Friday, the entire board wrote to the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, asking to resign. Last night, speaking here on SABC News, the Deputy Finance Minister, Mondli Gungubele, who's also the chair of the PIC, said that this was not an admission of wrongdoing on their part. The last few days have also seen serious issues and claims emerging around the PIC. To discuss this, we're joined by financial services writer at Business Day, Warren Thompson, is with me now. Warren, good evening.
Good evening, Stephen.
In a way, this was all started, perhaps, by Bantu Holomisa, the leader of the United Democratic Movement. He was one of the first people in the political space to come out and make claims about the PIC. Is it beginning to look like he was right to raise these concerns?
Certainly to a degree. Obviously, the sense I got from the PIC board resigning en masse on Friday evening was that they wanted to give the organisation and the inquiry every single chance of doing their work without any allegations or any insinuation that there was anything untoward. So while we haven't seen the evidence around some of the allegations that have been made by various people regarding the board members themselves, it still needs to be tested. I think it's just a case of, well, let's keep the slate clean. Let's not let anyone that's been implicated continue to be involved in the organisation, and let's let this inquiry headed by the retired Supreme Court Judge Lex Mpati get on with their work.
I mean, the figure of Mondli Gungubele, so he became the chair of the PIC because, I think by convention, it's not legislated by convention, the Deputy Finance Minister becomes the chair of the PIC.
Correct, yes.
He would only then have taken over that position last year. He said, he was very adamant about this, that there was no admission of wrongdoing on his part or on the board's part. Do you think he's going to be able to make that story stick? I mean, do you think that that's going to be how it's seen at the end of all of this, that he actually didn't do anything wrong?
It's very hard to tell, Stephen, without seeing the evidence and some of the detail around the allegations that have been made. Obviously, he was the one that initiated a review, I guess, of dealings of the PIC in December last year that led to some of the suspensions that we saw 2 weeks ago, just as the Commission of Inquiry started. But I haven't yet seen the evidence around the allegations made against him. So perhaps, in this circumstance, he will be innocent until proven guilty.
It's quite bizarre. We've got all of this money, I mean, R2 trillion, and now we have whistleblowers. We don't actually know who they are. People who are sending emails under certain names. I mean, what can we read into that? And yet, the people who, aren't giving us their names seem to have very important detail about what was going on.
Well, it's very clear that while the PIC has said that they do have a whistleblower policy, so that's a call line that you can phone if you're an employee or someone that's aware of a transaction involving the PIC. Certainly from the testimony that we got from Victor Siani last week, that in essence the idea of a whistleblower line or assistance to whistleblowers is nominal. It didn't really exist because there was this environment of coercion and intimidation at the PIC, as well as the fact that most of the revelations that have had some degree of truth that have been circulated by that fictitious email account or this anonymous person that is believed to be a PIC insider or as one time an employee, that also seems to indicate that no one really has faith that if they went and followed the official channels that the proper airing of these issues would be taking place. So that is certainly one of the things that the inquiry needs to make a recommendation on and needs to be reviewed in detail is how do people that have inside information whistleblow to authorities that will listen and investigate properly some of these controversial deals and transactions.
And then we also have the structure of the PIC. So back to this convention with the Deputy Finance Minister. So a political appointment, I mean someone appointed by the President, becomes the chair of the PIC. So not only do they have influence in the Finance Ministry, which I mean is their right, they also have influence over R2 trillion as the chairman. I mean, it seems that calls are growing for that structure to be changed, and perhaps for union federations or other bodies to be represented on that board. It is, after all, government workers' money.
Absolutely, and part of the problem there is obviously, besides just having the chair that's traditionally been appointed, it's not legislated, it's just a practice that's occurred over the last 2 decades, the Deputy Finance Minister, is the amount of control that's centered around the CEO and the powers that he had, and the conflation of the Chief Executive Officer with what we call the Chief Investment Officer, which in the private sector and in most asset managers, the two roles are kept separate. In the case of the PIC, they were combined when Dr. Dan Majila became the CEO in December 2014. So he had been the Chief Investment Officer. Now he sits with an immediate boss that's a political figure, and he has these enormous powers to sign off on deals. And as we learnt, a lot of deals would originate in his office. So it's that kind of relationship which lends itself to political interference, which the inquiry is obviously investigating. And I would see, and I would certainly bet that one of the recommendations has been, as the GEPF has requested, that role certainly be split, and then they look at perhaps appointing a veteran with some investment industry and corporate experience as the chair.
Okay, now let's just talk about the GEPF. Some of us get easily confused. We've got PICs all over the place, GEPFs. One is the pension fund, one is the PIC. Just explain the relationship between them.
Okay, so the GEPF, which accounts for 88% of the assets,
that's the government employment pension
fund, right, is a defined benefit fund, which means it promises every employee of the government at provincial and national level, from teachers to policemen to our military, a pension benefit when they retire. If the GEPF didn't have enough money to pay those benefits, the taxpayer would be on the line. And what happens then is that the GEPF has contracted exclusively to the PIC to manage its money, so to make all those investments on the JSE, in government bonds, in Africa and offshore. That is another feature of this arrangement that's going to come under scrutiny, because it's, again, not legislated that the GEPF has to use the PIC. It can, if it wants, use other asset managers, and perhaps when we look back and review the findings of the inquiry, that might be one of the recommendations as well, is that the PIC would compete for the business of the GEPF, just like any other investment manager does for investors' savings.
There'll be some people in very nice buildings in Sandton in the centre of Cape Town that'll be looking at this very closely.
Absolutely. But it's a very competitive industry, Stephen, and what it should do is it should lower the cost of investment management for the GEPF, if done properly, as well as broadening the investment opportunities that the government pension fund may have.
So in the middle of all of this yesterday, on the front page of another Sunday newspaper, was the figure of Zweli Mkhize. He's the Minister of Cooperative Governance now. He was the Treasurer General of the ANC. I think the accusation, as I understood it, was that he seemed to be facilitating PIC deals, but of course had no official role in the PIC. This takes us back to claims of politics and the PIC.
Absolutely, and certainly it certainly raised the issue when we learnt in the first set of anonymous emails about a potential relationship between Dr. Majila and a lady called Pretty Low. How can it be that at the request of a minister, the head of the PIC goes and meets with this lady to discuss a potential investment? Those are the things that we're trying to, we want very definitively untangled when we come out of this process. We do not want political interference in the PIC. And certainly one of the other things that we need to consider then is, who is the backstops and the safety checks that would prevent this type of thing from happening. And there we've talked about that structure where you have the Deputy Finance Minister as the chair of the board.
And then the other sort of investment that people are looking at is with IO, the technology group. Dr. Iqbal Survey is the chairman, and as far as I know, he hasn't responded to any of the claims that have been made. With the information that's publicly available, is it possible that something illegal or improper happened there, or do we need to wait for all the investigations to finish?
Well, we've certainly had devastating testimony from Victor Siani, who was an assistant portfolio manager in charge of that IO transaction. He said that the IO transaction originated from the friendship between Dr. Majila and Dr. Survey, and it was the driving force behind the transaction. And he's also made a number of allegations around how Dr. Majula effectively told him to change his opinion of the investment. He had a very poor investment of IO initially. He was told to change that at the request of his superiors, and how the IO transaction was approved and effectively the payment authorized before it went to the committee to be ratified, the investment committee that sits to hear the investment case for these types of investments. It's also astonishing that the PIC went back. This is now after a loan that they'd made to Dr. Survey's independent media was not being repaid, where the share price of IO had fallen over 50% thus far, so shaving 2 billion rand off the investment. They even went back last year again to invest in another entity called Sagarmatha Technologies, and that could have been between 3 and 7 billion rand. So you really have to question if it's not done on investment fundamentals, the attraction of the investment as such, what was really driving this PIC's almost voracious appetite to invest in Dr. Survey's entities?
Warren Thompson, thank you very much indeed, a financial services writer at Business Day newspaper.